nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start, I'd like to just thank or recognize everyone in attendance this evening. Starting at the end of the table, we have the City of Danbury Finance Director, Danny St. Hilaire. We have Ilio Longo, our Danbury Public Schools Finance Director. We have Dr. Bill Glass, our Deputy Superintendent. We have the Board Vice Chairman, Richard Ginelli. We have Board Secretary, Kathy Molinaro. Board Member, Bob Tadrasak. Board Member, Susan Leroy. Board Chair, Irving Fox. Councilwoman, Nancy DiMici. Council President, Joe Cavo. Councilman Ben Cheney's Joyce Emmett.
Director of Special
Director of
Services.
Special Services, and our Human Resources Director, Kim Thompson, and our Superintendent, Dr. Pasquarello, and members of the media in attendance. I wanted to start out by thanking the councilmen for attending this evening. This year, as with many of our prior budget or most recent budget years, we are living in very difficult economic times, and I think us being able to work together between the board and the council is going to be very critical as we go through this budget cycle, which we're on the precipice. Just a recap of where we are in the process before we turn it over to the administration for a presentation. At this point, the school budget for the next school year has not formally been presented to the board. There has been a finance committee meeting where the numbers have first been discussed. At our next regular board meeting next Wednesday, the budget will be formally presented to the Board of Education, and then we will be holding a special meeting on February 2nd for adopting the budget. And that's per the city charter. The budget has to be delivered by the 10th, 15th, at which point the mayor will receive the school board's budget. So the point we're at now is we're gathering information. We have a proposal from the superintendent, and so the superintendent and his cabinet will be going over what various cost factors we're facing going into the next school year. And so at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Pastor.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My pointers work. Those of you that were at the meeting last week, there's some new information, but the new information is really on the numbers. The presentation is basically pretty much the same. But for all of us, again, I think we need to be mindful that our job, your job, my job, is really to make sure that the core levels of education programming, that we maintain those. Some people define them differently. We'll talk about our definition of what those are. I do have a personal philosophy about things co-curricular that are part of experiences. But we need to really look at what is the core, what do we expect to deliver, what are we required to deliver. And all of you know that we are under the supervision of the State Board of Education regarding our outcome improvement plans. And that becomes part of our planning, that becomes part of core. So there are some things, for example, we are looking into with them now that were part of a plan that we may have difficulty in delivering in this economic time. There are legal and contractual requirements. We'll speak to those. We have a favorable year regarding our employees next year, thanks to our negotiating team from the board, and the arbitration that we received have been in best interest economically anyway for the district. Every position we have open, we're making a determination if it can be eliminated or restructured. Restructured means we may create a stipend position. Some of the jobs functions are essential, but if it's an open position, we see how we maybe can handle it differently. And legally, we may not be able to. If not, then we have to hire that position. We're talking about no new programs. There are things such as graduation requirements that I'm telling the board that we may have to put on hold. We're trying to get numbers on those. The new state requirements from the State Board of Education are going to go in effect in 2018 or 19. And a lot of it had to do with the choices of the youngsters in the area of the sciences. And those require labs. And Danbury had the forethought some years ago, I don't know how many years, when you put that addition on in high school, we put labs on in science, which would have been a major cost driver that, we have ample labs, thank goodness, to handle the added requirements for youngsters to take more science as part of our graduation program. Ours is more in staffing. So we're doing some analysis on number of students that are taking 4 years of science and how many students are taking more languages and see if in fact, but at this point we're saying we really want to study that. There are really no new programs other than the area of our technology management system. We have a current one that's going to be replaced because it's antiquated and it doesn't deliver the information that it needs to. It actually creates more work for individuals by utilizing the program that we have at this point. Next slide. This is a hard one, and I'll tell you why. I said this to the board. We get calls. Some very nice individuals want to donate, or the PTOs want to purchase, and it's all good stuff. Except our technology support system is finite. We just can't grow exponentially and expect them to be there and assist everyone to either reprogram or to repair the technology. So we're saying no, which is really kind of hard for us to say no to technology. But we really have to be very careful about what we're willing to accept because our people are telling us we can't get out there and service it. Teachers become frustrated that I got this new equipment, no one's showing me how to do it. PTOs and parents are upset that I've given them the stuff, why can't they use it? No, it just doesn't work that way. It's not there's not a one-to-one correlation to that right now. So we have to really put a moratorium on. Or some angel will give us some technology people and they adopt a school and someone pays some salaries. I'd be willing to look at that one. There we go about the graduation requirements, delay, or we need to restudy that. Relocate existing staff resources wherever possible to be, and we are. We may have to relocate individuals in order to be on site to do some things differently because of the budget. And to look for cost containment. Between last week and now, I think the budget has moved from 4.3 with some refining to about 4.02 or something like that. We're going to keep refining that budget. We were all at the mayor's meeting telling us to be very cautious of where we're going financially. So we're really trying to hone down that budget. We're working with David in technology, in our insurances, in purchasing to see how in fact we can really get to that number one, providing the core and trying to keep the costs down so that it's a reasonable budget going forward, so that it's responsible. Next slide. What we plan to do as a team, and Bill has the next portion. He's going to talk about his target of the core subjects here.
Thank you, Sal.
Yep.
This is a trickier slide. It's the most complex of all the slides we have. But we think it's a critical slide. If you look at the target up there, the dartboard, last year we cut into the actual core of the school system. Prior to that, we were nipping around the edges. There were things that we thought were supplemental and they were good things for kids, but we were able to pare those away given the difficult economic climate. Last year, we cut into the core and then we cut again in more deeply. So now we're only looking at these three concentric circles. Let me explain those to you. This is the concept that we're using in terms of how we're making very difficult decisions. I just want to punctuate this. You heard Sal speak to it. Elio, I'm sure, will speak to it. I want to mention it as well. Irving has spoken to it before. We feel very comfortable working with the City Council. We feel very comfortable working with the Mayor. We feel very comfortable working with David and his team. I think in times past, folks have tried to rally the troops and said, let's go storm the Bastille. We are the Bastille. We're all in the same building together. So we're really trying to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money and figure out how we can maintain what we have. We've really eliminated the concept of expansion or growth. The most mission-critical element of this is the piece that is at the very heart of the board's mission. And we're saying at all costs, maintain support for reading, writing, and math. And our argument is if you don't have the 3 R's, we don't have a school system. And we know that is almost pathetically simple. And what kind of school system do you have when you're looking at just reading, writing, and math? We're arguing if you don't have those 3 pieces, you don't have a school system. The next concentric circle out is a top priority for us. These are any initiatives that are required by law. So when you look at something called State Statute 1016B, 1016B says each school system must maintain a planned, systematic, and ongoing program of instruction in the 11 mandated areas. It also talks, state law talks about the need to maintain requirements with educational law in the area of special education, in the area of personnel. Joyce and Kim being here tonight to represent those, of course. And lastly, contractual obligations. And as Sal mentioned, we were, and depending on how you look at it, we were fortunate from a budget perspective. Everyone has come in at zero this year. The cabinet's taking zero, teachers zero, administrator zero, custodian zero, the list goes on and on and on. So everybody understands the really pernicious climate that we're in right now, financially speaking. But it also says that you hunker down, you maintain the contract by law. We went through arbitration, it is what it is. And so those two pieces say, maintain the 3 Rs and attend to the law. If we need to cut, since we've cut these two outer circles already last year, let me give you examples. We cut the kindergarten aide, the paraprofessionals. The board, the parents, students, just about everybody said, the group we want to maintain, we want to keep teachers in front of kids. And everybody else is, it's a terrible way of saying it, but everybody else is somewhat expendable. You'll see in some of the graphics we have later on how much cutting we did, not talking about teachers. Elio will walk us through one in a minute. We eliminated the kindergarten paraprofessionals. We now have 22 5-year-olds in front of one person, and one of the kids gets a bloody nose. Typically, the teacher or the para would take that young kid to the nurse, while the other adult would stay in the classroom with the kids. Kids have other kinds of mishaps being little kids. What happens? If you have two teachers across the hall from each other, 22 and 22, you don't leave one teacher with 44 5-year-olds. So they made that point to us. We recognize that, but we still chose to cut at that level. We wanted to keep teachers in front of kids. We also cut our gifted program for gifted students. We eliminated that, and instead we replaced it with an after-school and weekend program, which the good news with that is that we're getting good results, good feedback, rather from parents and from kids. But it's not the full-blown, robust program it was before. We cut our family and consumer science program, the old home ec, from the middle school. We just eliminated it. It no longer exists. So we've already made some tough cuts that we didn't want to make, but now we're saying reading, writing, and math, stay within the law. And this last concentric circle, if there are cuts to be made, this is where we'll be making them this year. And we have this as very important. So it's mission critical, top priority, very important. And these other items are important and good to have. Those important, good to have things have already been chopped. If we do have to cut, we're looking at ancillary programs, student support programs. We might look at social workers, psychologists, counselors, supplemental and extracurricular. We'll look at the arts, the fine and applied arts. We'll look at athletics. Operational costs, we've cut back on textbooks. I'm sure you've heard that before. Materials, equipment, no new computers. Adult development, we've dramatically slashed the curriculum development, the professional development, all of our outreach efforts. Those have already been cut, but that's where we'll go for the next round of cuts if we do have to make them.
Thank you, Bill. Understanding the major cost drivers of next year's budget. Last year's fiscal appropriation award with the City Council to the Board of Education was $112 million. It was locked in at the 08-09 year, so we were flat funded for 1 year. Current fiscal year, we received a 1.8% increase for a total appropriation of $114 million. The first round was identifying cost drivers for next fiscal year 11-12. Health insurance. At this time, we estimate approximately a 12% renewal rate on health care. 12% is a total increase in value of $2.9 million. $2.9 million as a percentage of this year's 114 would require a 2.5% increase. So health insurance exposure alone for the upcoming school year exceeds a total appropriation that was made between the fiscal years 9-10 and 10-11. ERA, which are the fiscal stabilization dollars. Some were direct payments to the school district, other funds were funneled through the state of Connecticut. We anticipate losing approximately $800,000 of federal subsidy come June 30th of 2011. So there will be a shift in burden. We retained jobs over the past 2 years. They are core mission jobs. Those jobs are simply not jobs or positions that we can cut from the school district. Therefore, there will be a shift of burden of $800,000 to the general fund, accounting for approximately 0.7 of a percentile point. Classroom staffing, based on guidance at all levels, would require an additional $600,000, a half a percentile point. Utilities, $400,000, 0.3 of a point. Teachers and administrators, we were very successful. We had great success, for next fiscal year on the arbitrated awards, where we have 0% awards, directly favors the management of the school districts. The $400,000, if you recall, was the agreement entered with the teachers and administrators, both by the Board of Education and passed by the council, that would defer a certain percentage of their current year increase to next fiscal year. The current award was 3%. If you'll recall, was split evenly, 1.5, 1.5. Well, the 1.5 at 6-month intervals amounts to 2.25 points. Yet their salaries will be pegged at the full 3% come June 30th. So the deferral was 75% of the basis point. Transportation, we have a $300,000, which is tied to our contracted obligation with STA bus service. And on the Era Jobs Funds credit, we received approximately $1.3 million of additional federal subsidy, better known or best known as the Jobs Funds, for the current fiscal year and for next fiscal year. We saved a handful of jobs this current year. We added a few positions, FTE teaching positions, where they were needed due to classroom size enrollments. And we set aside $400,000 for next year to act as a credit against a total cost estimate. So the static operating budget, in other words, an operating budget to take the current programs and roll forward to the new year, would require approximately $5 million, or a 4.3% increase. As Dr. Sal went through earlier, we continue to make revisions. We will continue to make revisions to our budget. As we stand this evening, we're closer to 4% than last week's 4.3%.
Sal, you want to, this was you on the comment?
What stress can be meant to reduce the 4.3, the cost drivers? One of the things is we're looking at cost containment. And I've mentioned this to the board before. We're having a problem with our transportation. Our enrollment's going up, our ridership is going up, and our equipment is staying static. We're having, and we have the magnet school program. We have school students that are going across town, so the catchment areas have changed, and we're having problems getting to schools on time. That's creating some issues with teachers who are staying, a half hour or 40 minutes, and some contractual issues with that. We have the private and pro schools program are having some difficulties with the same kinds of things. So the solution could be simple. You could add a bus or two. Each bus is about $65,000. We really can't go there, quite frankly. So what we're trying to do is look at our start times. They're telling me, maybe if we increase the time between dismissal of our parochial schools and our public schools by about 10 minutes, we probably can give it, give us sufficient time to get there, providing we're not up here in February and January. We're all having problems this year. But given, good conditions, our buses should make their rounds appropriately. So we're looking at that. We're working with the city, as I mentioned, looking at our administrative costs for benefits. Perhaps there's a better way of doing that where we can both save. Technologically, I'm not sure, other than possibly using each other in some of our programming, but there's a study group that David has gotten to look at our program. Everybody says, if we look at it, can you really, deliver more efficiency? Well, we don't think so. We think we're efficient, but let some outside eyes look at it for us. How's it going to hurt? So Maybe if it's not people, maybe we can share technology in such a way that we can save or have redundancies instead of paying for it. So we're looking at that. We're looking at, and this has come up at a board meeting recently. I think if all things being equal, can you put a textbook in each classroom? Is that doable? Yeah. But is it what you can do given the constraints that we have? So we're moving towards things like classroom sets. We've spent a lot of money this past year, revised about 17 curriculums. How many are we doing this year?
12.
12. So that the textbook's really a supplement to, not in light of the curriculum. So, does a kid need to take a book home every day carrying a backpack? I don't think so. But, so we're looking at how can we use our money better? And yet make sure the youngsters have the support they need to have if in fact they need these materials or if they don't have access to technology. So we're looking at that. In fact, the group that came in with David was working with the Buffalo school system. Syracuse. They were spending $10 million or $12 million a year on textbooks. They went to a whole different system, which they're down to about $1 million, I guess, thereabouts. And we've asked them to share that technology with us. How's it working? Is it something we want to do? Can we do it? So I think we're kind of looking at so many things. It's more than pencils, potholes, and police. I get that. We all got to provide that kind of stuff. But we're going to keep working. We heard the message, and we know what's going on. Our dream is that full-day kindergarten here. That's not happening. We're having trouble offering support in kindergarten. And I invite anybody who wants to walk with me into those classrooms. The kids are crying, they're tying their shoes, they got to go to the bathroom, they got to get this. You got a half-day kindergarten, the teacher's about pulling their hair out. It's tough. It's tough without those days. And yet, we're lucky and we got some real dedicated educators that are doing the job. But we're really not growing other than our enrollment. We have in the budget, I think at this point, I want to say 6 new staff members because of enrollment. There's, I believe, 2 we're looking at the elementary. Because of our bilingual situation at the middle school we're growing. I believe we have 3 scheduled for the middle school.
One in 6th grade, one in 8th grade,
And
special ed, and possibly an EL.
And what at the high school go? Is it notice?
We have 2 placeholders right now.
At the high school. So, that's where we're at right now. And of course, the high school, knowing the students go through their when they develop their schedules, we'll know better. Kindergarten, we don't know. When I talked to Dr. Dames, who's the superintendent of schools for the parochial schools, their enrollment is growing, which I'm finding interesting. So we're all growing in the Danbury area. So the parochial schools. So we have the demographer that's looked at our material. Those things. It's a 10-year study, but they're only the first 2 or 3 years they're the strongest. And we're already exceeding what they've said we would have in school this year. So, it's coming to fruition, what they've said. We are growing, in fact, growing at a faster rate. So we're trying to have an early kindergarten registration, so we have a better handle on these things. So we're working with our preschool program so that we can, take a look at what we're doing so that we can program correctly. I'll let anybody on the cabinet if I'm looking right here at Kim. She's working with looking at possibly how we man our classroom with substitute teachers. Is there a more efficient, effective way of doing that? So I think we're talking to Hamden and some other districts that have some services. Services are using more money, but in fact, it may be more cost effective overall because in our system, if we can't put a teacher in a classroom, particularly at the middle and high school, we have to have someone in the classroom, and we have an amount of money we have to pay a teacher that when we purchase their planning period, it gets to be a cost because you have a teacher in the classroom. So we're working on that front as well. Joyce has been working with our special needs program. She's now in charge of our Reach Rebound to make sure that's a vibrant program that we're keeping youngsters in. I think Danbury does a remarkable job for years in keeping students home and not placing them out. We've had some students place out. If you look at our budget, you'll see a discrepancy, and that's grown by, it said today, 25%, our placement. Was that not about that outplacement? a lot of that is not attributed to our teachers not working. If these youngsters come in and are placed by DCF, and we have no alternative but to honor that placement. You know, we just can't do anything. And quite frankly, it is the best place for the youngster. I think it's our job to support that, and we do. But some of those things are unanticipated in the budget, and we have to figure out how to pay for it as we go through the year. But that's increased by 25%. So we're doing, I think Danbury's been doing a good job in that area, so that we can be responsible to the taxpayers. Some givens here is that we know we have to be responsible to taxpayers. We have to be responsible to our children and sensitive to the economic climate. I mean, it sounds like, you know, apple pie, but it's true. We're all going through it. It's nice to see that the economy is coming back, but it's not coming back in municipalities. They are affected much more business. We understand that the money there is much more limited than it is in industry. Industry now, from what I'm reading, everybody had more jobs. We all have more jobs here. And they're making enough financially where they're adding some staff. No, we're going the other way. Bill has taken on more departments. Elio has. I have a personnel director and a lawyer sitting next to me. We have a special ed educator taking care of our programs, and we had full-time administrators before Dr. Diluski left. She's taking part of this job. I am. Teachers are doing the same. So we're in a different state than business out there. But I think we're very, very sensitive to that. There's no question we're very sensitive to that. Oh yeah. You went the wrong way, bro.
Our general fund revenue sources for current year appropriation of $114 million. City of Danbury, approximate cost to local taxpayers about $91 million per year, the 114. ECS, which is Education Cost Share Formula, and our state reimbursements total approximately another $20 million. And for the current year, we have total federal subsidy of $3.2 million. Now, the $3.2 million, which is tied as an offset to the current ECS, well, the state legislature this year reduced on average 14% in education cost sharing to municipalities across the state of Connecticut. The reduction of 14% reduction was filled with a $3.2 million of federal subsidy. In theory, if we were to lose this $3.2 million, there are just only a couple available options. One option is for the state of Connecticut to step back up to the plate and fund ECS with 100%, or this ECS, or the state to pass the ECS burden down to the local municipalities, and more than likely the municipalities would then hand it over to their local boards of education. So in theory, a $3.2 million reduction would either be a cost share burden to municipalities and or to the Board of Education if the state of Connecticut elects to choose not to fund it 100%. In terms of percentages on a dollar basis, local education cost the city of Danbury 80 cents on a dollar, subsidized with 17 cents per dollar in state reimbursements and 3 cents per dollar in federal subsidies.
Just one point I want to make about ECS funding is that, you know, given the time frames that we're working under, it's going to be impossible, at least from our side, to know what the governor's not even going to propose a budget until the 16th of February. So by that time, we have to be locked, we have to approve our budget. And that gives plenty of time along the latter parts of the process if something does happen in ECS. And it's going to warrant the council's consideration what the final number is. But that's something we really have no insight. It is a drive to keep it at least flat. I went to Hartford a couple of weeks ago, and there were several board chairs there really lobbying legislators hard the first day of the session, you know, to try and keep it flat. But the reality is the state's facing a $3 billion deficit, and so they're going to have to cut somewhere. So the odds of it being flat are, you know, is it 50-50? Is it less? We don't know. But it'll be impossible for even to get a bearing until the governor comes up with what his budget is in the latter part of February. So we're operating on your.
If one of the given is to make the assumption that the 14% is going to be funneled through to the municipality and to us, then that operating number that you saw in that slide from Elio would not be at 5%, it would be about 7%.
Correct. Yeah.
Just going forward, if in fact that comes to fruition. But in conversations with the mayor, we're making the assumption based on the governor's proposition and proposal that he's doing all that he can to keep ECS at the current level. That's our, and that's what they were advocating up there as well that day, to make sure that it gets filled.
And that's just, it will be impossible to know what happens till the governor.
They actually do, right?
Current year appropriation 114, total cost composition, colored bar stack. We pay specific attention kindly to the bottom two bars. The bottom bar represents total salaries. Salaries of about approximately $68 million, representing 60 cents on the dollar. And benefits of 20%, representing $22 million. So between salaries and benefits, we expend approximately 80 to 81 cents per dollar. The remaining 19 to 20 percentile points are also tied to contractual services, rent obligation, lease obligation. We have set asides for equipment leases and the like. When we get to the very top of the stacked bar, we find our discretionary funds, although I care not to label as such, because at one time our instructional supplies and textbooks truly discretionary, but collectively they represent approximately a nickel on a dollar. So going back to Dr. Glass's earlier concentric circle display, as we begin to strip away the outer layers, where we're stripping from or of are the discretionary funds, which amount to approximately 5% of the total budget appropriation. We know that Danbury School District is efficient. It's not that we think or believe, we know that we are efficient. When we look at the per pupil expenses over the past 3 fiscal periods, dating back in 06-07, Danbury's per pupil expense totaled $10,700. Compared to our partners within our district reference group, we are Dirk H. In 06-07, our partners on average expended $11,900. The state average expenditure was $11,500. In fiscal year 07-08, we spent $11,200. Our partners spent $12,300 on average, the state $12,100. In fiscal year 08-09, our per pupil was $11,700. Our partners on average spent $13,000, while the state spent $12,800. So from 06 through fiscal year end 2009, we were well below not only the state average on per pupil expenses, but as well as within our DIRT category. In terms of percentages, we'll lock in the state at 100% value and compare the DIRT and Danbury to the state average. In 06-07, at a time period when the state spent $1 on education, Danbury Public Schools spent 93 cents against the state dollar. Our partners exceeded the state average by 3 percentile points. We were 10 points below our partners on average. In the mid-year, 07-08, again, the state is fixed at 100%, representing a dollar basis. The DIRT, again, exceeded the state average by 1 percentile point, and we trailed our partners by 9 percentile points, spending only 92 cents compared to $1 on average for the state of Connecticut. And in 08-09, 91, 11 percentile points below the DIRT group, 9 percentile points below the state average. 3-year trend, we went from 93 cents on a dollar to 92 down to 91. The DIRTs showed some improvements in the mid-year, but pretty much leveled over the 3 years. And the state was again fixed at 100%. Bill, can we go back to that slide? Just one other point I really would like to stress here. For some of our DIRT partners and for the state average, on an earlier slide where we had the cost composition for the local taxpayer, Danbury taxpayer, amounts to approximately 80 cents on a dollar. When we're considering, or you're considering, expending an additional dollar, that marginal dollar on education, the total burden to the local taxpayer is 80 cents on a dollar. For many other communities, given their very high education cost share receipts, it may very well cost on that marginal dollar only 30 cents. So go ahead, spend that extra dollar, because on the local tax base, it's only amounts of 30 cents. Here in Danbury, for the marginal dollar, amounts on average to 80 cents of new funding. Thank you very much. To identify full-time equivalent loss for the fiscal year period 2009 through the end of 2011. In 2009-2010, we reduced teaching positions by approximately 22 FTEs. For the current fiscal year, we cut an additional 12 and a half, for a cumulative loss of 34 to 35 positions. As a group, we cut teachers' positions by 4%. Our paraprofessionals, 4.5 positions 2 years ago. Current year, we reduced 13. Bill shared earlier the paraprofessionals as we moved them from our kindergarten classes across the district. Cumulative 17.5 position, or a 2-year loss of 12%. Administrators, 3.2. This year, 3.4. 6.6 combined. 14% reduction through district administrators. The superintendent's cabinet. We had a cost share 2 years ago away from the general fund to a grant source. For the current year, we reduced half a position. Cumulative effect is 1%. We're only 5 to begin with. We're down to 4, 20% reduction. Secretaries combined 2 years, 3, 4% reduction to the workforce. Custodians, we lost 5%, total of 4 FTEs. Nurses, 2 over the 2-year period, a 9% reduction to the workforce. 2 years ago, we shed approximately 33 positions. Current year, 36 positions. We reduced the total workforce by approximately 69 positions over a span of 24 months.
Thanks. I'm going to go back to what Elio said over here. Administrators and cabinet, which is just a different kind of administrator. These are the senior level administrators. Actually, the cabinet is comprised of Joyce, Kim, Sal, Elio, and myself. So 20% cut represents not replacing the assistant superintendent. And the administrative cuts of 14%, you can see how although we did cut a larger number of teachers, percentage-wise, we barely touched them compared to the administrative staff. Here's another way of looking at that. It's hard to see, but 4 years ago, in 2007, we had 52 administrators throughout the district for 9,800 students. 52 for 9,804 kids. As Sal said, we've been growing. In 2010, we have 38 administrators for 10,400 kids. So each of these spots that you see, these vacancies, those are the people that we've cut. Let me just randomly pick one. This person right here could be identified as Sue Rice. Sue is our technology director. We have chosen not to replace her at this point in time. As Sal mentioned earlier, I've assumed full responsibility for technology. We have multi-million dollar installation, technologically speaking, and it should merit having a full-time person there, but we've went with the prevailing thought that it's appropriate to cut at the administrative level before we cut at any other level. This is a good opportunity for me to say thank you to David. He's been nothing less than terrific working with. We're trying to find ways of economizing, as Sal mentioned earlier, blending services. Can we combine our IT departments, the cities versus the Board of Ed? We've had some wonderful conversations. David has really done a great job of leading that. We've brought an outside team to help us get smarter on this. We don't know if we can have a cost savings, but we're trying to do everything we can in terms of turning over every single rock. The biggest point here, I think, is you can see where those vacancies are. We have cut dramatically into the administrative ranks. Some of these bodies represent principals. It's by law you must have a principal. So we have 13 elementary schools. That's 13 principals. 13 of those shaded areas are represented by the pieces that we just have to have by law. And there's only one of them at every elementary school. As significant as these cuts are, the next slide is even more dramatic. Pop back for a second. When you see this 4% cut with teachers, and the cumulative 34.7, if you look at this slide, this represents the reading and math specialists. These are teacher level positions that were represented in the earlier slide that Elio did. These are cuts within the past 3 years. These folks provide direct classroom support. And if you remember that bullseye, reading, writing, and math, for us, if you don't have that, you don't have a school system. 2008, so 38 specialists for roughly 4,900 students. 2 years later, 19.5, down from 38. And we've gone from 4,900 to 5,200. So you can see how much we've devastated the ranks of those specialists. They're teacher-level positions, but they're not teachers in classrooms. They're teachers who work with kids in classrooms with direct service. Sometimes you walk into our schools, you'll see them in the hallway with small groups of kids. They're all certified staff members. So between these two slides, if you look where we've cut, the argument was, well, we think you guys are bloated. We, meaning the community at large. Well, we can make a compelling argument, we think, but if we even went with that in 2007 with 52, it's very hard to make that argument now with 38. And we also have Sue Rice's position on the line, and there's another position down here that we're studying that we may not fill as well. So that 38 may drop, in fact, to 36. Same thing here, how much we've devastated this group of educators. Be very quick with this one. Our class sizes, we staff at the kindergarten through first grade at 22. What does that mean? That means we have one teacher for 22 kindergarten students. A couple of years ago, at kindergarten, first grade, and second grade, it was one teacher per 20 students. We made the decision a year ago to take second grade and move it from 20 students up to 25 students, and to take K and 1 and move them from 20 to 22. When you heard Sal mention we have a placeholder for 2 teachers next year at the elementary level, we don't know what we're going to get in terms of kindergarten. A lot of folks have said we can't afford the non-public education tuition anymore. We're bringing our kids back. We've seen an increase in kindergarten enrollments. So we have this tentative placeholder. If we don't need it, we won't use it. We're going to remain at 22 kids per kindergarten to first grade. It's not popular with parents, but it's the number we think we can justify in terms of being fiscally and educationally responsible. We'll stay at 25. We do have classes of 26, 27, 28 right now, and our principal said we'll just deal with it. At the 6th through 8th grade level and the 9th through 12, teachers teach 5 periods a day, a different group of youngsters each period, 25 kids per group for a total of 125. We have a few groups that are at 126, 127. That's reasonable, we think. Folks don't necessarily appreciate it, but we think, again, it's fiscally responsible. So bottom line with this slide is, this is where we're looking right now in terms of volatility, and we may have some increase over here. Very quickly on this one, we've had exponential growth in just the 3-year period that we've cut all those specialists. 2008, roughly 9,900. 2009, roughly 10,100. 2010, roughly 10,300. You can see how dramatic the increase is. This is very unique for a school system, especially when other school systems are going down. We, in fact, are reflecting the opposite pattern. Bottom line with our demographics, and we've had a professional demographer, Dr. Peter Prouder, who was employed for many years by the state, and retired and went independent. As an independent, K-5 should remain at approximately 5,200 kids. However, this is 258 students, or a 5% increase over the enrollment projection by the external demographer. So we have already exceeded by 5% what the projections of the demographer have indicated. When we say projections, these are based on things such as live births. We count the number of kids who were born, and then we just move them forward 5 years as kindergartners. 6 to 8 middle schools will increase by 70 students. Doesn't sound like too much, but recognize the fact that both of our middle schools are about 1,100 and both are overcrowded right now. And 9 through 12 should stay at about 2,900 students. At the same time, and you've heard Sal talk about this before, if you look at last year, 2009, 29.4% of our kids lived at or below the poverty level, as identified by students being eligible for free and reduced lunch. This year, we've had a dramatic spike up to 46%. What that means is, as our population is growing, we're becoming poorer at the same time. If you saw the article that Fitzgerald just wrote about poverty, the research is pretty definitive. The higher the poverty level, the lower the test scores. Why? Because these youngsters don't have the same opportunity for enrichment activities that many other kids have from more affluent communities. Another way of saying this, when we looked at kindergarten, is that kids from low socioeconomic means, kids who live at or below the poverty level, come to school with about 3,000 words in their vocabulary as first day kindergarten students. Kids who live at middle of the road income levels, moderate income, come to school the same day with 5,000 word vocabularies. And kids who are affluent come on average with 7,000 to 9,000, as high as 12,000 words. So the first day of the first year of a student's academic career, there's a gap between 3,000 to 5,000 to 9,000 words on average, and it's determined by the poverty level. And you can see over that 4-year period, our trend line definitely is on the upward incline. To make the challenge a little bit greater, because we felt that we were under-challenged, so we wanted to stir the pot a little bit. This one is particularly vexing. 39%, roughly 40% of our kids who move in and out of our schools annually. Meaning, if you look at the yellow ochre color of the pie, there's stability here. These are kids, roughly 60% of our kids come to a school and they stay at that school. So if they start at Shelter Rock in September, they leave Shelter Rock, or they stay at Shelter Rock in June and they move on to the next grade at Shelter Rock in September. However, close to 40% of our kids move either within the school system in any given year or inside and out. Meaning, we'll get some youngsters leaving Danbury and going to Waterbury. Meanwhile, some kids are coming from Naugatuck into Danbury. Or, the youngster who started at Shelter Rock may move to South Street, may move to Morris Street, may move to Park Avenue, may move to Great Plain. We have had kids who have actually moved 5 schools in 1 year. That is particularly challenging for teachers when they have kids coming in and leaving as moving targets. What we've done to address this, we've stabilized our curriculum across the district by grade level. We've paced it out. So if you were in one school in September and October, when you go to another school for maybe November or December, you're not going to have a repeat of what you just had for the past 2 months. So all teachers at all grade levels are moving along a very specific continuum. Sal?
This is a recap, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll just focus on it. This is a big thing for us right here, maintaining class sizes. I think they're too large. The board thinks they're too large. We're struggling to keeping them at that level. This year, we were fortunate with the jobs money, we were able to add a class. What you may hear as a council member is, how come this school has this and that's? Well, that happens. If you have 3 sections or 4 sections at one school, you tend to spread them out. If you only have 2, then guess what? If you have 3 or 4 extra, they'll stay within that catchment area. And so you might have 27 and 24, where another school you divide by 3. So that does happen. We do have some inconsistency. But generally speaking, we try across the city to have that, because that's a big impact, particularly at K1 and 2, to keep them at that level. And my worry is to move to, and I said it last year, to a city kind of a program where you're running 30 in a class. That is absolutely, I think, absurd. And it's not going to service our students well at all. It will wind up costing us more money with special needs students and others that will look for other venues to support what they're doing. It will not be a good program for us. And here, we have to work on the achievement gap. You could read the other ones there, but we're on the bubble with the state, the closed gaps. The stuff that we see going on in the schools is just tremendous. The professional level of the teachers, the conversation that the administrators are having with their teachers about youngsters, it really is pretty powerful stuff. We have to continue doing that. But you heard what Bill said. If a youngster comes in with 3,000, if our poverty level is going up, they come in with 3,000 in terms of vocabulary, middle income at 5 and possibly 12. Every year it grows exponentially. We need to go out, and we have a school bus now that we're turning into a literacy van, that we're going out in the community to try to work with parents on literacy. We need to engage, we call the parents into a program where the kids are exposed to a greater scheme, where they're able to look at and understand literature and concepts based on their life. Right now, they're very narrow-minded. In fact, Bill told me 2 weeks ago, some principals were complaining, telling me some kids don't know their surname. Correct? Which is, it's hard for us to think about that. How does that happen? We get youngsters in our school system that, yes, it helps with our mosaic in terms of our backup, but they've never been in school. Those that have been in school, it's a little easier transition. So we have this great gap. So we're working on keeping class sizes at the as low as we can, and then also focusing on the achievement gaps, and maintaining a safe and orderly and clean environment. And we thank the city for this one. The buildings are not owned by the schools, they're owned by the city, and you know, a big part of the lion's share of the responsibility falls on them. I think we do a great job with what we have, and those of you who have been in high schools that have 3,100 kids and have middle schools with 11 to 1,200, I think ours are pretty orderly with the folks that we have. We've got pretty much respect for students, but you know, they do challenge us, no question. So we need to be vigilant and be present, and I think we do that well. You want to end with this one?
It just comes back, and then I think Irving had a slide as well, talking about upcoming meetings, but if you go back to Elio's slide, per pupil expenditure, Danbury is that yellow ochre, and the darker salmon color. Those are the, thanks Sal, those are the districts like us. That's a Stamford, that's a Norwalk, there are other small cities. We're not making any complaints whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we think we have bragging rights that we're spending less, but you can only have bragging rights if your performance is equal. We, on average, outperform the entire district reference group. I think there are 14 districts within our area. If the council remembers last year, we had a slide that showed 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, reading, writing, math. Every test score at every grade level was up. And this year, for our ELL, our English language learners in mathematics, which is probably our toughest population, our ELL kids, because they just don't have the language yet to understand the instruction, we not only were at the top of our DER, we scored almost in the middle of the next DER higher. So our performance is way up comparatively to districts like us. But when we have things like this poverty level growing, we're really getting very concerned about that, because our principals, rank and file, and Sal mentioned, I don't know if it really sunk in or not, walked into a classroom with a principal and she said, watch this. And she walked over to this little boy. This goes back to about October. And she said, what is your name? And the young man said, James. And she said, what's your full name? And he goes, James. Went over to another youngster and said, what is your name? Joe. What's your full name? Joe Cabo. So some of the kids did not even know their full name, much less their colors, their numbers, their letters, while other kindergartners are actually writing, kindergarten style, but they're still writing. So our concern between that and this mobility rate is really going back to this mission critical thing, at least the 3 R's. We have to stay in compliance with state law, state and federal law, that second circle, and then the last circle out. If we have to cut, we recognize, as Sal said, being good fiscal stewards. If we have to cut, we're talking about that particular area where the cuts will come from.
Yeah, so just we use this in another setting, but just to keep people informed of where we are, and I won't go over all the dates again, but I think I mentioned on the outset where we are in the process. We're going to be presented the budget at our next board meeting, and then we're going to be voting on it on February 2nd. And at that point, it goes to the mayor. He's going to have to weigh various requests by all the city departments. He's going to make his presentation, and then we'll have discussions with you again in the month of, I guess, April, after the mayor proposes his budget. And then the final resolution will have to come back to the board at some point, as it has the last several years, once we have a final number, because at that point, the state numbers will probably be more solidified, and we'll have a better idea of where we'll be able to come in at. And then we'll have some more discussions at that point. One thing I wanted to mention that kind of sets an undertone to this is that some of the actions that we've been able to take over the last several years to blunt the impact we've seen, the reductions that we've taken over the past couple of years, but we really didn't show what they could have been if not for several one-time items, some aggressive negotiating on the part of Ilio and the finance team, but some really one-timers that really aren't available to us anymore. We did offer early retirement a couple of years ago, and that kind of prevented a wave of layoffs we would have had to have taken. So you see the number of FTEs being reduced. I don't think that reduced in any or very few actual layoffs. just because of the early retirement program. And that was kind of a one-timer. The federal monies that were passed a year or two ago are another one-timer that's running out and it's not likely to come back. And then look back even 2-3 years ago where we renegotiated our bus contract, our health insurance contract, we've changed providers and that sort of thing. I think even copiers, we kind of renegotiated that. I think everywhere outside the classroom where we can minimize the administrative costs we have. And so I think a lot of those we're continuing to undertake those efforts. But I think we're seeing, as this downturn has prolonged itself, even the fact that we deferred 1.5 points in salary is something most municipalities would say, all right, the economy has to get better, it's a cycle. But as it draws on 2, 3, 4 years, even these maneuvers are going to catch up with this. And I think we're seeing that going into next year. I think the availability, unless something happens that is unexpected, these one-timers really aren't going to reappear themselves. And so what I'm seeing is a lot of other districts that really haven't either been as aggressive or haven't undertaken them. They've already made many more significant cuts in the last year or two that we've had to take. And even though what we've taken is painful, I've heard stories of I was just up in Hartford a couple of weeks ago. There are districts that have curtailed athletics, music and arts, all the things that we've talked about. I think we've been able to defer those actions a year or two just from some of the fiscal management we've undertaken here. But that time might run out, depending on where we shake out. So I don't want to leave everyone on a dead end. But we're continuing to find every possible avenue that we can before we hit services that we're providing. That's the best we can do. I guess what I'd like to do is to open the discussion. I first want to open it up to board members who'd like to comment or ask questions, and then we can open it up to City Council, and so we're going to have a free discussion. So I first want to, with Mr. Janelli, who's the chair of our Finance Committee.
I also want to mention, to pick up and add to what Eric says, in terms of the board and administration, I like to think that we're thinking outside the box and a little bit more creative thinking. This is what we've done a couple, 3 weeks ago. We've met with Representative Geithner, Tabersack, and Senator McLaughlin. We had a meeting with them, pleading with them to go back to Hartford and ask the legislation not to impose any more unfunded mandates on the school if they're coming down, to hold off anything that was in the pipe that may cost us some additional monies. In this particular economic climate, nobody can afford anything further that isn't financed to us. The other thing, in terms of the slides that were presented, I'm not 100% sure if a certain calculation was taken in, but the population of the Danbury school system has grown. We're unique. I think we're one of 5 districts out of about 80 in Connecticut that have grown, and the others have grown by a couple of three students, not to the extent we have. But our middle schools are all bulging, and the influx going from the elementary into middle schools are going to present a challenge, to put it politely. The west side of Danbury just recently had the good fortune of having a contractor take over a facility, the Rivington facility that was bankrupt, and the Toll Brothers came in. They are aggressively looking to move and to build some 1,800 units, some of which are going to be senior citizens. With these 1,800 units, this is going to put I'm assuming there are going to be students in a non-seniors, but that's going to put an additional strain on the Mill Ridge School and part of the King Street School. I'm not sure if that's been factored into these numbers. So again, although the city reaps the benefit of some more property taxes, we've got more of an educational course coming in. So that is very concerned for us. The population growth is extremely critical for us in terms of the number of students we have moving into the middle schools and then eventually into the high school. We've also have done something different this year. We went outside and met with the community at large, principally business people, religious people, etc. And we called it an Adopt a School program. We've been very fortunate so far to have over $40,000 given to us in terms of of resources. Some 17 or 18,000 was in the form of cash from the food service company, and another 18 or 20,000 value on a particular bus that Sal was talking about relative to literacy. We also have a list in there of services. Over the summer, Sal and Bill reached out to the principals and asked them, what does your school need? So we have a list in there so that we can go to the business communities and say, hey, can you provide us, as Sal started the early meeting, can you provide us with perhaps some instructional training on some of the technology here? Can you come in and help our students with maybe a internship? Can you offer us whatever you can offer us, whether it be in-kind services or financial services? So we are looking at every avenue to help mitigate the financial crisis, but also part of the Adopt a School program was also a benefit to have the community as a whole be more involved with the educational process. So we are moving in a lot of different directions to squeeze the dollar and make it more, more effective and more efficient for us. That's all.
Any other board members like to comment, questions? Mr. Tavis?
I'd just like to, number one, make a comment. I think it was very important in our negotiations that the mayor did present the city's case. I think for us to have tried to have done it, what do you expect from us? I think that played a very, very important part. And, I think in the future, that is something that in negotiations, I think maybe would be nice to continue. But I felt that being on the negotiating team, I thought that was a must. Because if we did it, they would say, what do you expect them to say? Type of thing. Okay? That was an example where I thought was real plus. The other thing is on cost containment, I'm going to ask the council people here. We do have a program on, the solar panels on a few of the schools' roofs, and with the CLMP and the State Energy Commission and so forth, the program coming before the council, and being on I was on the Sites Facility Committee, I'm not on it anymore, but I thought this was very, very important. I wasn't appointed to. I thought it was very, very important because we can work on cost containment. If the dollars aren't there, that's kind of, we can't print it. We're not the federal government. But on things like cost containment, whether it's that energy program or what have you, the city can do the same thing. I saw Ridgefield recently, I did something on their, recreation center or something on it. But the thing is, I think that is an area that we can work on for everybody. Where can we cut down the cost type of thing? And I hope, I hope there's more interaction between us on that. And I'll be honest with you, I hope the city does support the energy conservation. We think we can save, $250,000 a year on that one. I mean, we're wrong on that. Well, you're the man with the figures. Am I right on that? Or, and what you don't spend, maybe you can shift it somewhere else.
I think it's counseling that sometimes, people pulling on their shirt tails in different ways. And let me say this with all honesty, if there's a question or a concern or an issue, just give me a call, any of the cabinets. Last year we talked about schools and teachers, and a lot of things did happen, and we honestly listened to folks, and we tried to be mindful and careful. Ultimately, it becomes my decision to advocate for the youngsters and the board to make a decision. But we did listen, we do care. So if you hear things that don't seem to be right or some oddities, let me know, and I'll, of course, get back to you and let you, try to explain it to you or find out what the answer is. We are not closing any schools this year. We did that last year. There's rumors out there about ACE. We think ACE serves a special population, and quite frankly, it's a viable program that if you didn't have it, it'd be very costly in other matters. So that program's not going anywhere. Our middle schools are growing. You saw the number up there of 70. What that means at the middle school is that we have to call split teams, and for certification reasons, you can't teach 3 years. You don't have a math, language arts, and social studies teacher. So you have to put another team together. you know, things happen. So if you hear, well, why is the STEM Academy getting in? Well, there's some good reasons to it. You know, we did that to keep our enrollment, you know, at a reasonable level at one school, and it is a special program, you know, and it's gotten criticism, but we've tried to be fair in its staffing. In fact, they've had some less staff than others. So, but if you hear things, you know, just let me know. You know, I think it's important. The thing about textbooks, you may be hearing about that. I think it's true. You know, we didn't. We have how much in for textbooks coming?
250.
And sometimes the request could be how much?
$1.2 million.
Millions. I mean, you know, so you obviously can't do all that, but you try to find other venues to do it. We have a multi-text approach, or we have class sets. We have other things that we have to do. So, but if you hear things and you need some kind of, you need information, we're here to help. We try to explain. You may not agree with it, but at least I can tell you what the truth is. You know, you can get it from at least from the horse's mouth. With that, it's...
Well, I'd like to say on behalf of the council, we do appreciate all of your efforts. We've always appreciated the efforts that you've made in these past years as members have served continually on the council. We see what you do, we know what you're trying to do. We appreciate you listening to our input and involving us in the process. And we, you know, don't envy the job you have, and I'm sure you don't always envy the job we have. It's a tough year. You know, the other night we met as a group at the Greek Orthodox Church on Clapham Bridge, and there was a gentleman in the audience who said something about, well, you know, we keep getting hit for these fees, you know, through the PTO organizations, and why don't we just raise the taxes enough to cover that? And I sat in the room and I thought, you know, I think that's probably the least thing I hear whenever I go to door. In fact, it's completely the opposite, and it probably only falls in second to, hey, why don't you put a cell tower in my neighborhood? It's, you know, it's very difficult for us. You know, we're on both sides of this, and you know, we hear you and we understand, and we appreciate the job you do in trying to educate the youth in our community, and don't think that we don't. It's just, it's difficult, and we've faced difficult challenges on the other side as well. So thank you, and thank you for involving us in the process.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments, Mr. Cheney?
Question to me, I also have a comment. I do appreciate these workshops, because for me personally, the more I could know what the number, the more detail, the better I'm more educated, so I can make a better decision on budget time. But last year when we held these workshops, one of the things that we did request is that if we can get a budget scenario where it would be a 0% increase, 2% increase, and a 5%, this way we can see the impacts. If we do have to reduce your figure down, at least we'll know what that impact will be. So whether or not, so we can say whether or not we need to actually request it, and if we do, we know what that will mean in dollars.
Well, I recommend the board not go there this year. And let me tell you why. We did last year. It created such a morale problem in this district. It was devastating. And we had people wondering and applying for jobs, and it was really hard. So we've asked, that's going to come to fruition, we understand that. But what we're trying to say is that we have cut so far in the budget. If we were to receive the zero, I mean, just, you know, just think about the zero. Class sizes all will be up to 25. Your half-day kindergartens they'll be all half-day kindergarten. We had a series of recommendations. What we're going to do then, we'll go back to those recommendations and scenarios and revisit them and see which ones that we would have to, you know, we would choose. So rather than say, well, this is what we're going to do it's this is what we need with the concept that I'm saying to the board, is it not to slide backwards. We're not sliding backwards. If we were to be reduced 2 million or 3 million, it's going to mean programs for students. It's going to mean staffing. It's going to mean the core area that Bill's talking about. And to put that out there, you know, it just really created issues and problems. So we decided that would not be a good thing. You want to talk to me one-on-one and go over those with you? I have no problem with it. You know, and then say, these are the kind of things. That's okay. But we just didn't want to start those scenarios. Again, because of what it created. It was really, I appreciate why you wanted it, but it just was not it did not help our education here in the school system. Yeah.
we've, punctuate Sal's point, last year we had a number of our folks bailing out on us when the word came out that we were looking at cutting in certain areas, and they literally left the district. And some of the folks that have left and some of the folks that are still leaving are some of our very best people, and they're very marketable even in a tough economy. So the idea of putting that out there shakes them up. The way we've been looking at this is overly dramatic, and so I want to put that out first. But when you've cut back to below the heart of the district, we're starting to say things like, well, as human beings, we want to lose our heart or we want to lose our eyes. Which one are we willing? Which organ are you willing to give up? So, well, if you give up your heart, you're dead. So, yeah, remove my eyes. As crazy as that is, you played out in things like we have football, we have baseball, and we have basketball, and we have reading, and we have writing, and we have math. If you have to give up one side or the other, what do you give up? In an urban district especially, you give up athletics. A lot of our kids come in large part. That's the driver that keeps them coming to us. It's the door that opens up higher ed for many kids. But you cut out reading, writing, and math in lieu of those other things. So by putting that stuff out, it becomes, as Al said, so dramatic that we get people coming to us trying to convince us to get down and see you. Will you come with us? Will you help organize a group of parents to come down to the council? And we keep saying, they're us and we're them. And David was over here meeting with us, and we were over at Davis Place meeting. And we're saying it's just all of us in a horrible, horrible economic climate. So the idea of saying that graphic with the concentric circles, that's pretty much what we're saying. If we have to cut, we've said, all of us have said it, that top circle, those co-curricular programs, those adult growth and development programs, the materials, Sal mentioned Sarah case of 10 million. They have 25,000 kids, we have 10,000. They have a $10 million textbook budget, we have 250,000. So we told them we'd be more than happy to take $2 million from them, and they'd still have way more than we would. And they're trying to find ways of economizing. So we're just trying to be professionally responsible to the community and not pit folks against you who we turn around and say, no, they're working to help. To your point, Joe, we don't want to sit in your shoes many times, and you don't want to sit in our shoes many times. So it's the same pair of shoes, basically. So we're trying to keep a lid on it, Ben, so we don't get people riled up and scared.
And the other point I would make is that because of the large number of unknowns that we currently have, we mentioned some of those before, some of them are internal and some of them are external. When we talk about the gasoline and the fuel rates, we talk about utilities, insurance rates, we're projecting those items at a certain amount. Those are significant increases. Through negotiation and whatnot, those may go up, they may go down. At this point, to put a scenario across, when you have an items such as those that can swing hundreds of thousands of dollars either way, and then we put out, well, we can cut this or we can cut that. To Bill's point and others, we can stoke a whole exodus or a lot of panic when we come back at the end and say, well, we found the $500,000, let's reinstate this. If we, as opposed to looking at this more in detail as we get closer, we're going to pass our budget with many unknowns. By the time the council is going to deliberate on the budget, the mayor would have put together, here's what the revenue projections are for the city, here's what the city can afford, and here's roughly, and that number is going to be, and by that time, a lot of these other unknowns will be clear. How much will the state give in ECS? I think that may not be final, but we'll have a much clearer direction on that as well. And so at that point, we can say, when we come to you again, okay, we have a much clearer understanding of what the final target will be. What will the impact of that be versus what we've passed? What changes would we have to make given a much more concrete number than we have right now in January? And I think that at that point, it will at least result in a lot less back and forth and scaring people only to come back and say, oh, we've saved you, or people who think they safe and all of a sudden we say, no, we have to get rid of this. And I think we can avoid some of that. It's going to have to happen eventually, but I think we should have that discussion with much more clearer information than we have now at this point.
On both sides, clear information.
Then to follow to redefine, when you do propose the budget that you propose, can you break it down in a way for your, to the model you presented, you know, for your core, how much is the core? And then go out, so so in total, we would know how much of the pie that would be your budget. How much is reading, math, and arithmetic, how much of those programs that equal that core? And as you go out, how much is that? So we'll know how much of the pie, how much of the cost in total.
You're looking directly at me, Ben,
No,
but this is a conversation at the cabinet level that we have all the time. And Sal's been very clear with us, you know, we'll do scenario planning. Elio, you crunch the numbers, Bill, you do the instructional impact, Kim, you do the staffing impact, Joyce, you do the support impact, and then we come back and make recommendations. And you know, we're trying to do as good a job as possible, helping to illustrate to you the process we've gone through and what we've already done in terms of cuts. And then, you know, eventually we'll get down to a numbers game. And as Irving said, you know, we've been accused at times of, you guys have, you know, rabbit in the hat. You've been holding it. You can see that there is no hat. We've gotten rid of the rabbit, we've got rid of the hat. But we constantly keep working with David. We're trying to find a way of combining IT services that we could save who knows what, if we can save anything. So we will, as the short answer, but in the process right now that we're going through, Ben, it's just going to take us some time to really play all these horrible scenarios out and then take the least devastating one and then recommend to the board, this is what we're thinking. And they may turn around and say, as they did in the past, nope, we don't like that option. Go back to the drawing board and figure it out.
The meeting that Joe had mentioned that we were at, when everybody gave the presentation to Greek Orthodox Church a week or two ago, was really a phenomenal meeting. With the population of people there, maybe 50, 60 people, really left that meeting knowing that it was a united front, that it wasn't the Board of Ed problem, it wasn't a city council problem, it wasn't the mayor's problem, although he's got the perch on his shoulder, but that everybody there, including the parents, has a stake and a piece of this particular problem to work together to resolve. So I was very happy that that was the final outcome of that meeting, because having the public understand and perceive that there is a unity, you know, it's good. It's that we are working together for the common cause. It's not us against you and vice versa. So that was I think, a terrific and beneficial outcome as a result of that meeting that was given, and the presentations that were given. Because I think it was very clear on all sides. Joe made it very clear what the council's role was, or is, and the administration presented pretty much similar numbers here, and the public had an understanding and a time to digest what the implications are, and also that circle was very descriptive as to this pretty much is where it's going to be cut. What's in there, you know, is something else, but it was very informative from a unity point of view, and I was very, very happy with it.
Further discussion, questions?
One thing, I want to make sure it's important for the council to know that the school and the city is working together on any areas that we can find common ground. Dr. Glass said made the point several times that we're working together on IT. We're working together on other areas for purchasing. It's really, the door is wide open. And it's not just in those areas. Wherever we can find common ground, we're asking each other questions on, you know, things such as paper. You know, they buy from a different vendor than we buy, but they buy at a much higher volume than we buy. I mean, it's things as simple as that. And the door is wide open, and our minds are, more importantly, our minds are wide open to ensure that we're doing the best job that we possibly can for the sake of the taxpayers, so we're not cutting into our core services. Now, the core services are much different than the core services on the city side, but the goal is still the same. And hopefully, you know, the pot is limited. We all know that, you know, the taxpayer's dollar is very precious, and there's a very limited amount of that. And we're trying to strive towards making sure that the priorities are straight and trying to figure out new ways of trying to satisfy, you know, the delivery of those services without harming the quality of those services. But I appreciate all the, you know, the advice, and, you know, I've learned a lot by working with these guys. And I think, you know, I think we can make great strides towards achieving the same goal. And, you know, we do have a large gap to close. The money stream is not growing. We all know that. We all know, you know, what we're up against. And, but we all have the commitment. And I think we can close that gap to a point where it's something that hopefully the taxpayers, I know they're committed to the education, they're committed to the quality, you know, police force that we have and all the other quality services that the city provides. So we just have to make sure that we're able to providing those services at an affordable cost.
Any further comments, discussion? Ms. Molinaro?
I would just like to bring the conversation back to the overcrowding, and I wondered if we could somehow work together to get our building committee back up and running, to look at spaces for kids, because even if we do get a miracle windfall and we're able to hire 15 more teachers, where are we going to put them? There just is no room, especially at the 2 middle schools, which are, I think, dangerously overcrowded. So if we could ask the mayor, through Mr. Cabo, to...
I mean, and we certainly can do that. I mean, if you're talking about building a third middle school, right now...
No. I know that that's not even on the realm of possibility, but looking for spaces within the city, that we could make another STEM program, that we could do another, you know, small satellite program.
Mr. Genie?
Just follow up on our comment. If we do get those 235 new students in our school, I've been hearing about starting a split session. Is that something that the board is considering?
No, the board hasn't considered anything. There has been a subgroup looking at alternatives, and that was one of the things that they looked at, you know, some kind of a split schedule. That has been costed out. The board has not approached it. We just explored ideas with Dr. Davis' superintendent for the parochial schools, for Archdiocese, and see if they have space. They're crowded, so there's no space there. So I think these are all things we're going to have to consider. Just as anecdotally, whenever you have a staggered start like that, it's typically a one-year solution. It's an expensive solution because you have tremendous busing that you have to, you know, to do with it. And Danbury, whoever developed the Danbury system of a multi-tiered busing system, could not work. You'd have to have you know, so much, you know, that might not be the most cost effective. And it would have to be something that would sustain itself for years. So, but the board's we're going to have a workshop on them. We'll let you know so you come and listen. We're just beginning to talk about ideas. We have a school, you may have heard me say it, the board may not do it. It's been a goal for us to create these, let's just call them little satellite schools, magnet schools. We closed MRI last year. There's the thought that in 2 years it could be reopened as a middle school. We have the beginnings of a STEM program and another program that we want to look at, so we're making some recommendations. So, you know, we have possibly a space for it to do that. Shelter Rock is one that we're getting numbers that are just killing us, a 51% increase. In fact, the meeting we were at with Mike McLaughlin, he kind of questioned whether or not everything was looked at. We've got to re-verify that. We still have an issue with the elementary school, how we would handle it. So we still have a plan for middle school, not much for the elementary. And the high school we're doing, as Kathy said, we're trying to work with Westcon, looking for some maybe other satellites. But those are all things that came up in the meeting since last spring, I think. Some board members and Dr. Bluesky had, where they talked about alternatives. But the board has not reviewed.
And one thing I would add is that what we're talking about now is more of a strategic solution. I think we all acknowledge that we will not have money in our operating budget, at least for the next year or maybe two, to implement any of the recommendations that we're going to see. And so, you know, by the time we get 2-3 years from now, we're going to be in a crisis mode. But hopefully by that time, we'll at least have the money, if the space does exist at MRI or elsewhere, then we'll be able to fund this expansion in our operating budget, just given the enrollment that continues to rise, especially at the elementary level where class sizes, when they get to the middle school 3 years from now, are going to go up about 100 a grade from where they are today.
And there's just no
So
room.
that's the storm we're trying to prepare for, even though we don't have the money for it currently. We at least want to have the strategic plan so that when that influx of people does hit the middle school, we can at least address that problem in our operating budget, as well as the space concern.
But to prevent that critical role from happening, I think what Kathy said, that building committee is more important that we start putting that committee together to prevent that critical situation from occurring.
You need a plan, Ben.
We need
You
a plan, because, you know, government works slowly sometimes. By the time we get the committee together, it's going to start working. You're talking possibly midsummer.
That's, it's a long
Well, but
process.
there is a committee in town that's established, it's just sort of doing the 2020 committee. So I think that the structure is there, it just needed to probably be reconvened and to look at the materials that we have. So there is something out there. But we're ready to do a workshop for the board just to sort of start having a discussion about, you know, what's the short-term solution and the long-term solution.
Any further discussion? Well, seeing none, I just want to thank the councilman for coming this evening. I think this was a very productive discussion. I hope you got as much out of that as we did. And we look forward to continuing to work with you closely as we go through the budget cycle over the next few months. But thank you very much for coming out this evening. And thank you. Thank everyone in the administration as well for preparing.
Oh, thank you.
Motion